Yeah, that's
okay. Yeah, great. Right, so thank you. The title of our talk today is Quantitative Analysis and Reconstruction of Underlying Factors for Errors in the Uses of the Present Perfect Tense in Russian and Spanish Learners' Academic Writing. And I should say that this is work in progress. So we began this study, this research, I think, like almost 3 years ago, and well, we are still in the process of doing it, yes, of carrying it out. Okay, so let me tell you about the plan of the talk, the outline. So we will start with talking about the reasons why present perfect is so difficult, so hard to master for learners of English. Then I will briefly tell you about the equivalence of present perfect in Russian and Spanish and the semantic context present perfect is used in. Then I will tell you about previous previous research on the use of present perfect in different varieties of English. And then we will talk about our study. So we will present our data and the method we used, and then Olga Iliinichna will present you the results we have gained so far and the way we interpreted them. So that's it. That's the plan. So present perfect has been proven to be one of the most frequently used tenses in English, which occurs in different registers, including academic prose, as it was demonstrated by Douglas Weiger and co-authors in their seminal work, Grammar of Spoken and Written. What is it called? Grammar of Spoken and Written English. Am I right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, published in 1999. So even though present perfect emerges at quite early stages in English as a foreign language courses, so if we take, for example, the famous English file or New Headway published by Oxford University Press, we will find present perfect being presented there at the elementary levels already. So nevertheless, a full system of uses, including the distinction between present perfect and past simple, which causes most difficulties for EFL learners, is mastered only at the most advanced levels of language proficiency. The problems that students face when using present perfect forms have been described by a number of researchers in the field of second language acquisition. And according to Davidova, this might be explained by the fact that present perfect, being a morphologically complex category, also has a complex system of uses determined by its various semantic meanings. Another explanation of the complexity of present perfect for learners of English is L1 transfer. So first, the use of present perfect by L2 speakers of English is likely to be reduced if their native language lacks a formal or functional category corresponding to present perfect. Second, L1 influence on the number of forms produced or on the emergence of form meaning associations is limited. And besides the semantics of particular verbs, for instance, the so-called telic achievement verbs, that is, verbs with defined endpoint, might cause, as Collins put it, non-target-like use of the present perfect. However, it was shown in corpus-based studies that the influence of learners' native language on the use of present perfect in some cases may be very different to what was expected. Namely, that L1 typologically and structurally close to English does not always facilitate for learners of English faster and more accurate production of present perfect, which is quite surprising.
And this is exactly what we hope to show today with Spanish. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, and our study is based on the analysis of specific and universal mechanism underlying the occurrence of present perfect forms in Spanish and Russian varieties of English. We compare two corpora of academic essays written by Russian and Spanish undergraduate students with the initial hypothesis that Russian learners of English will use present perfect less frequently and make more errors in its use than Spanish students, because in Russian there is no exact equivalent to present perfect tense, while the Spanish paradigm of verbal tenses includes the perfect. And now let's talk about the equivalence of present perfect in Russian and in Spanish. So Russian verbs, as we all know, have the forms of past, present, and future, and the overwhelming majority of the verbs have two aspects, perfective and imperfective, which allows speakers to express various meanings. The key difference between the aspects is that the imperfective aspect is used to denote either an action in progress or a repeated action, while the perfective aspect denotes a single completed action. And this makes Russian perfective aspect a phenomenon of nature completely different from that of the English perfect tenses. As for Spanish, so the Spanish language has the present perfect form, which is similar to English, both in terms of the form. So the form is present indicative of the auxiliary verb haber plus past participle of the main verb. And in terms of the use, Elena, so Ольга Ильинична, correct me if I'm wrong, Горбова or Горбова?
Горбова. Елена Викторовна Горбова.
Горбова. Okay, thank you. So Elena Gorbova in her book, The Problem of the Spanish, posits that today's uses of Spanish perfect, which sometimes violate two important rules restricting uses of present perfect with specific temporal references and uses in narrative chains of events, demonstrate that this form is in the process of grammaticalization, known in the typological research as heuristic drift, with the semantics of this form being like a bridge between past and present, and at the same time preserving the pragmatically subjective current relevance meaning. To get the implication of this conclusion, we need to look at different uses of English present perfect. So in literature, four dominant specific contexts, four dominant semantic contexts of English present perfect are usually distinguished, and you can see them on the screen now. They are first the well, I think we should go back to the previous slide. So the resultative context. Okay, so it seems that we have no slides.
The four contexts come a little later. Do you want me to go forward?
Yes, please. So I should have.
Because you were going to talk about world Englishes. That's why.
No, I was going to talk about the semantic context, but.
Yeah, here they are.
Okay, thank you. So, right, so the first semantic context that is distinguished is the resultative context, which denotes a past action that results in a change of state at the moment of speaking. That is current relevance. For example, I have lost my keys somewhere. In a resultative context in Russian, the perfective aspect of the past tense is used. For example, она сломала руку. She has broken her arm. In Spanish, to express a result, present perfect is used. The next is the extended now context, which is used to describe a situation that started in the past and continues into the moment of speaking. For example, I have lived or I have been living here for 3 years now. Extended now context poses difficulties for Russian-speaking learners of English because in Russian, to express this meaning, the imperfective aspect of the present tense is used. For example, я живу в Москве с 2000 года. So I've been living or I've lived in Moscow since 2000. And to illustrate the difference, the interference of the first language, of the native language, Davidova gives an example of a frequent erroneous utterance produced by a speaker of English with Russian being the native language. So a learner would say, I am studying French for 5 years. So just because of that L1 transfer. In Spanish, just as in English, present perfect is used to denote an action taking place in a period of time, including the present. So this form is sometimes referred to as past in the present and can co-occur with such temporal adverbials as ahora, that is now, hoy, that means today, and estos días, that means these days. The third semantic context is the experiential context, which implies that a situation or an event occurred once or several times before the moment of speaking, in cases when definite time reference is not given. So, for example, I've seen it several times, so I've seen it many times. In Russian, the imperfective aspect in the past tense is used in this context. For example, я смотрела этот фильм дважды. I've seen this film twice. That is why, again, according to Davidova, when talking about experience in English, Russian speakers frequently use past simple instead of present tense. In Spanish, in this context, like the extended now one, is considered to be of present relevance and requires present tense. And finally, the recent past context, which describes a recent event, again, without reference to the definite time of the action. For example, I have just taken my final exams, which in American English, in this context, in American English past simple is usually used, but we talk about the British variety of English. So, despite the subjective character of the notions of relevance and recentness, speakers of English and Spanish tend to agree to a large extent on what can be considered as a relevant piece of news, and thus use the present perfect to denote this action. In Russian, there is no difference whether the event happened recently or some time ago. In both cases, the imperfective aspect of the past tense is used. Compare. Я недавно видел друга. I have recently seen a friend. And я видел друга месяц назад. So I saw a friend a month ago. In Russian, we use the same form of the verb, that is видел, in both cases. While in English, different tenses are required. Due to the lack of this difference, a common error in Russian English is using present perfect when describing events with definite time reference. So, for example, this example is again given by Davidova. I don't think that Europe has done the right thing when they united in one. So, this utterance, this sentence was produced by a Russian speaker of English, and you can see that there is an error in this sentence.
Елизавета Alexandrovna, I'm sorry to be interrupting. I just want to draw your attention that the next slide, this one, gives other norms, other terms for the same four contexts.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Okay, and now I think that we should go backwards. Yes, and so what about the use of English present perfect by speakers of other languages? Variation in the uses of present perfect by native and non-native speakers of English has been approached in different works, but today I will focus only on 3 of them, just to save time. Right, so first, Davidova studied the use of present perfect in the corpus of non-native writers of English, that is Russian, German, and India, and compared them with the London Land Corpus, LLC, spoken English, which represents the standard English dialect and was used in the work as a benchmark against which non-native varieties are studied. Well, she examined the same 4 semantic contexts that I have just mentioned: resultative, extended now, experiential, and recent past. Davidova reports that present perfect is underrepresented in the studied varieties of English compared to the corpus of L1 English, which can be explained by the complexity of this category, so that L2 speakers generally tend to avoid the complex present perfect and use the simple past instead. In line of this finding, Siana and Suarez Gomez, in their 2013 work, examined the use of 10 most frequent verbs in the context that convey practical meaning in the corpus of conversation, including the varieties of English used in Hong Kong, India, Singapore, and the Philippines. So they found that the perfect is opted for by native speakers in more than 80% of cases, but only in 60% of cases in the 4 Asian varieties of English. A difference which was proved to be statistically significant. So, the use of present perfect in learner corpora has also attracted considerable attention. For example, Bardovich-Helwig's longitudinal study of Arabic, Japanese, Korean, and Spanish learners' oral and written data showed that the learners routinely confused the present perfect form with the forms of the simple past tense and present tense. And the author concludes that this might be explained by the fact that the semantic knowledge of the present perfect was not established to the fullest in relation to the other tenses. So these studies pave the way for a fine-grained investigation of the use of present perfect in L2 learner writing. And in our study, as I have already mentioned, we focus on the usage of present perfect in academic essays in English written by Russian and Spanish undergraduate students, under the hypothesis that Russian students who lack this category in their native language use present perfect less frequently and make more errors when using present perfect in comparison with Spanish students, since Spanish attests this point. And 3 research questions are addressed. So you can see them on the slide. Which students use present perfect more frequently in their writing, Russian and Spanish learners? What semantic contexts with present perfect prevail in the 2 corpora? That is research question 1. Research question 2 is what are the differences as regards the use of temporal adverbials with present perfect Russian and Spanish varieties of English? And the 3rd research question is who make more errors in their uses of present perfect? Which errors can be described as independent of learners' native language and which can be explained by L1 transfer. So the analysis was conducted across 2 corpora of undergraduate students' argumentative essays. The third corpus, the corpus of native speakers' essays, was used as a control corpus in this work. And now on the slide, you can see the information about the corpora we used. So you can see the types of text. They are the same. Essays, then number of tokens and number of texts. So, and now I am giving the floor to my co-author, who will tell you about the results we have gained so far and the way we interpreted them. So, Ольга Ильинична, over to you.
Thank you for the nice introduction, Елизавета Alexandrovna. And I'll quickly add a finishing touch to this table on the slide that you are looking at. The 3 corpora may seem slightly unbalanced if we look only at the number of texts. But if you look at the number of tokens that those texts are made up with, you will see that the difference goes the other way. Then the learner corpora are comparable with more than 800 Spanish and more than 900,000, sorry, not 100, but 100,000 tokens in the 2 learner corpora, although the corpus of the native speakers is about 1/3 of them. So on the other hand, we look more closely at the 2, we compare in more detail the 2 learner corpora rather than learner corpora with the corpus of native speakers. So for the statistical purposes, the smaller size of the corpus of native speakers is not a problem, but for the closer look at the nature of errors, the 2 learner corpora are comparable. So this is the statistical description of all the sentences in which present perfect was used in the 3 corpora. And you will see that the uses themselves are much higher in the Spanish corpus. And you remember it's almost the same size as the Russian corpus. Russian corpus is just slightly larger. But the native speakers corpus, which has the same number of texts as the Spanish, has only 1/3 of those uses in the Spanish corpus, while the Russian corpus, being the largest, has the smallest number of the uses of present perfect, the total uses. However, you will see that corpora, the 3 corpora, are also different if we look at the percentage of texts that use present perfect in general. And you will see that almost all Spanish texts, which I remind you are opinion essays, almost all of them have present perfect used in some way. And the figures are very impressive. 681 texts out of 716 texts. That is impressive. You will agree with me, hopefully. While native speakers use present perfect, and these are also argumentative essays, use only in about 1/3, even in less than 1/3 of the texts, and Russian texts have sentences with present perfect, even at a smaller degree, at a lower degree. Only 660 texts out of more than 3,000 have sentences with present perfect. So in a way, we do suspect that Russian learners use present perfect much less than Spanish learners. But on the other hand, we may also suspect from those rough estimates that Spanish learners overuse present perfect in English, and we'll try to come to understanding why it happens. On the other hand, it's interesting to see what percentage of sentences among those with present perfect have time adverbials. And time adverbials here for the statistics included both what is traditionally called in grammar books markers of present perfect, unspecified time reference, something like already or just now or just even without now. So kind of good uses of prototypical uses of present perfect with those markers, with those time adverbials. But it also includes uses of time adverbials with which English present perfect in the English language is not recommended. Things like, just as Elizaveta Alexandrovna gave an example, when the specific time in the past is given in the sentence and the learners still use present perfect, which seems to be banned in English grammar. So this kind of is a short conclusion about the frequency. Spanish learners use present perfect in almost all argumentative essays, just as I said, in 96% of them. The Russian learners only in 22%, and native speakers, oops, I can see the misprint here, I'll correct it later. Native speakers proportion is 29%, slightly less than a third. But Spanish students tend to use present perfect with temporal adverbials in 11% of present perfect uses, which is close to the way native speakers use present perfect. They use it in 12% of sentences, while Russian students use present perfect in a higher, at a higher percentage, in 20% of all uses of present perfect. You will see then what happens in Russian, why this percentage is higher, but we'll first try and understand what's happening with this overuse of present perfect in Spanish. Elizaveta Alexandrovna has already talked about the 4 contexts, and this is the graph that shows the proportions of present perfect uses in the 3 corpora. And you remember 2 of them are learner corpora, while 1 is native speakers corpus, LOCNESS, which is in this graph demonstrated with the bars in gray color, right? And you can see that the largest uses of present perfect in all 3 corpora are to express results as a rule by the moment of speech. The second largest, which is much lower, is extended now context, something like for how long a particular action has been going on or has gone on. The third, with the figures quite close to the second, is the experiential context, when speakers report a result again, as a rule, by the moment of speech. And in this context, in the reporting the experience of the speaker, the three corpora are very close to each other. You can see that it's 11% of all present perfect uses in Russian corpus, 9% both in Spanish corpus and in native speakers corpus. While the recent past shows almost as many uses, almost the same proportion in the Russian corpus, 10%, which is very close to 11% for experiential uses, while Spanish and native speakers only use present perfect to express recent past in 3 and 2%. I must say at this point that the opinion essays in Russian corpus are slightly different from opinion essays in both Spanish and native speakers corpus. They are shorter first. That's why there are 3,000 texts in the Russian corpus and 700 something in Spanish and native speakers. Russian essays are much shorter. And on the other hand, Russian authors had to mostly agree or disagree with the opinion stated, or give their own opinion, again, on something that has already been stated in the task. While in Spanish and native speakers corpora, they had to develop their argumentation in full, in details, with the longer thread of arguments. So this may explain why this difference in the proportion of contexts talking about recent past. The last two even bars are for the percentage of errors, and we considered the production of native speakers as free of errors, so there are none attested in the native speakers corpus. And you can see an amazing fact that in spite of the statistical differences between Russian and Spanish learner writing corpora, you can see that the percentage of errors was exactly the same. 6% of sentences with present perfect had errors in them in both Russian and Spanish corpus. It doesn't make the nature of errors the same, but statistically, and this has been proved, it's only 6% for both learners. So at least a half of our initial hypothesis was refuted, wasn't confirmed. Okay, so very quick conclusions about the context. Spanish uses of present perfect in the four contexts do not look very different from those of native speakers. Overall they don't. They are very close to the percentages attested in native speakers corpus. But this has nothing on a way of explaining much higher frequency in Spanish essays. And the naturally the question arises, does that mean that in some contexts, Spanish learners consistently use present perfect in those cases where native speakers don't? Because that seems to be the only way to explain why 96% of texts in Spanish corpus have some present perfect sentences. So hopefully this will be shown in our error analysis. Before we show the statistics, here are a few kind of typical for Russian and Spanish learners cases when present perfect was not used correctly. First, these are sentences when the exact time adverbial, where the time adverbial giving the exact time in the past is present in the sentence, and nevertheless, for the predicate that talks about that time, about that very time in the same sentence, present perfect was used. And we can see those in both Spanish corpus and Russian corpus. So a terrorist group has murdered a lot of people in the famous attempt in Madrid in 2004, written certainly after that, after it was not even a recent past at the time this essay was written, or last year, and then has become really popular in Russian, from a Russian corpus. Then, unfortunately, original disc with music or film have cost about $15 to $20 per disc. And in this sentence, we have to look up at the broader context to understand whether what the person meant, what the author meant was it used to cost, and then it has to be just cost and not present perfect, or whether the person means costs at the moment when the author was writing it. So either way, it's not a present perfect here, because nothing prompts us to any of the four contexts we have discussed. But it might be present perfect used either instead of simple past or instead of present simple. Then something about Mr. Blair who has stood, and then we know when it happens. It's when the capital punishment was given in court to Saddam Hussein. This is an event from the past, even though there's no time adverbial given here, but the description of the event is kind of makes it clearly the event in the past. More than that, in the second sentence, which is perfectly related to the first, we can see the use of past simple. And this is something that is more common for Spanish misuses of present perfect than for Russian, even though we sometimes have come across such things in Russian corpus too. Then again, December 2004, and has been approved. Sorry about the mysterious symbols in the title. That's how the Spanish letters were transformed in the corpus. And then finally, an interesting example from another incorrect use of present perfect from a Russian corpus. People in Russia have never had a chance to taste bananas, oranges, and another exotic fruit. Looks as if it's a nice use of present perfect as experiential in the experiential context, until we read the end of the sentence, which is without the input of products from Africa as an example, and that makes it unreal conditional sentence. So what the author wanted to write is people in Russia would have never had a chance to taste exotic fruit without the input of products from Africa as an example. We haven't seen things like this in Spanish corpus, but I must admit that in Russian corpus, it's also exceptional, not a prototypical example, contrary to the first five. Statistics, we are going to see some interesting things here. Which tenses would be correct in the context where present perfect doesn't make sense in the production of Spanish learners of English and Russian learners of English. So you can see that Spanish learners quite consistently use present perfect instead of past simple. 85% of those incorrect uses of present perfect are the sentences where past simple would be grammatical. Past simple would make much more sense. And 15% would be correct with present simple instead of present perfect. And interesting statistics for Spanish learners, and hopefully we'll have time to show why. In Russian corpus, there are more, not just 2, but 4 possible forms that would be kind of more correct, that would be correct instead of the incorrect present perfect. Past simple is also the largest, but instead of 85%, we have 59%. So much less. Although present simple is used in more than twice as high percentage as by Spanish learners, 32%, but also some present perfect instead of past perfect. It's just 6%, but nevertheless. And as I said, would with perfect infinitive, not many cases, just 3% of all misuses of present perfect in the Russian corpus. So this is the gist of what I have already said, so I'll skip it. The next statistical presentation says that where other tenses are used, we would expect present perfect in Spanish and Russian learner writing. In 78%, I'll move this, in 78% in the Spanish corpus, past simple is used where we would expect present perfect. In 70%, again, of misuses of other tenses where present perfect would make a better sense. In 17%, present simple was used where we would expect present perfect. And in 6%, present continuous was used by Spanish learners where present perfect would make a better sense. And for the Russian corpus, past simple is also the largest, but again, it's not as large, as high the percentage as in Spanish corpus. In 61%, past simple was used instead of present perfect. In 36%, and again, it's twice as high percentage as for Spanish learners, present simple was used instead of present perfect. And I'll say something ahead of the statistics shown. It's just as Елизавета Alexandrovna said, it's practically always for those cases of extended noun, when the Russian intuition prompts Russian learners to use present simple instead of present perfect. And only 1% for both past continuous and present continuous, which I think is a big achievement. Well done to instructors of English who have warned Russian learners not to use past continuous and present continuous, where in Russian it sounds as imperfective aspect. Okay, and this is the conclusions. The most common tense that is used where present perfect would be appropriate by both Russian and Spanish learners is past simple. And more examples here. women were always better at housekeeping or cooking, Russian learners. Cannabis, which was known at the same time in both China and the ancient, should be Greece, for 15,000 years, was known instead of has been known, because it's still known in both areas. And at the same time, it's slightly confusing here, but it has nothing to do with when cannabis started to be known, because it's still known. It's the ongoing process of knowing what cannabis is. The second most popular tense is present simple. There are lots of crashes in recent years. Recent years, the marker of present perfect, but it's just present simple in the Russian sentence. And to sum up, there are many arguments concerning the safety of the world since the war against terrorism began. Since the particular moment in the past has to be present perfect. In a Spanish learner used again present simple. Statistics for Spanish corpus, of the four contexts, the highest percentage goes to extended now, and this is only for errors. Sorry, I forgot to mention from the start. This is a part of error analysis. 54% of errors in Spanish corpus in the use of present perfect are made in the context of extended now. And we were talking about Russian intuition prompting Russian learners to use in extended now present simple instead of present perfect, but you can see that the percentage is much lower, only 24% for Russians, while it is 54% for Spanish learners. And in the recent past, only 6% of context use present perfect inappropriately among the Spanish users, while in Russian production, 39% is the largest percentage for this very recent past. So recent past is misused by Russia. The context of recent past shows misuses of present perfect for Russian learners 6.5 times as frequently as for Spanish learners. And this is something to think about. The other three are kind of the same. 24 is slightly higher percentage than 19 or 18, but nevertheless, they're comparable. They are kind of, each of them takes a fifth, while a recent past takes up 2/5. Okay, that's again the gist of what I have already said. And that's an interesting thing about which tenses are used in Spanish and Russian learners' essays by the context. And it's interesting that both in Spanish and Russian corpus, the experiential uses are only show past simple instead of present perfect. And this is a very interesting point, statistical point, of which probably further research is necessary. Elizaveta Alexandrovna, you will agree with me that this is something to look at in particular. And even though we have some hypotheses about it, it still needs kind of confirmation. While in other cases, for instance, Spanish have also only one tense, present simple, when talking about recent past. But if you remember the errors, they very rarely make errors in that. So it probably means that they use recent past instead of present perfect for a reason. And this reason has to be connected with something in Spanish. It can't be, otherwise it would be very strange that only in recent past they only use present simple. In two other contexts, the resultative context in Spanish uses a third present simple instead of present perfect, and 2/3 past simple, again the largest, instead of present perfect. While in Russian corpus, it's practically the opposite. About slightly more than 1/3 for past simple and almost 2/3 for present simple. So a very interesting distribution. And the extended now, as I said, it's a very interesting context for the comparison. But Spanish and Russian corpus learners do the same thing with this context. As far as recent past goes, in Russian corpus, we have 1/3 expressed by past simple and 2/3 by present simple. Conclusions about the underuse first. In the resultative context, the most popular choice in the Russian learner text was the present simple, as we've had such an example before, but here's one more. The influence on human consuming such produce and animal meat is not studied yet with the marker yet, present simple. But in Spanish corpus, past simple is more frequently used. Remember those 85% and then 78%, it's past simple for Spanish corpus. We'll see it's connected to aorist in Spanish. However, it seems to me that this doesn't have to be directly related with the wearing of the veil, as I already observed above. It's about my observation that has just taken place, and it is presented as the result, and nevertheless no present perfect, just simple past. The recent past, in recent years, there are a wide range of crashes of planes in Russian, just as we kind of predicted. And secondly, lately, the world lives terrified by the fear of a war, lives present simple, not simple past for a change, in Spanish context. We'll move on to what research has about present perfect uses in Spanish. And as Elizaveta Alexandrovna mentioned, the research was at least at the end of the 20th century and very beginning of the 21st century, the research was about what the result means and what this recentness and relatedness to this recentness, what do these phenomena mean? And the two famous aspectologists, Austin Dahl and Bernard Comrie, wrote these things about present perfect related to the uses of present perfect in Spanish. If a person dies, the result in a narrow sense is that he is dead. The results in the wider sense include other results. For instance, his relatives being sad. It is results in the narrow sense that characterize resultative constructions. In the case of perfect, the delineation is much harder to draw. And that is one of the reasons why the resultative use of the perfect shades off into the experiential use. Elizaveta Alexandrovna and me, when we were annotating our corpora, Russian and Spanish, we did have a lot of difficulty differentiating between the results and experiential uses. We worked out a hypothesis on how to do it, on what markers we will need to annotate, one as a result and another as experiential use. But then we're not sure 100%, are we? He said, Alexander. And then Comrie said, even more interesting, it's not clear that the mutual exclusiveness of the perfect and specification of the time of a situation, meaning the time in the past, is a necessary state of affairs in the language. In Spanish, for instance, this is what is important for us, where the perfect does have specifically perfect meaning, it is still possible to specify exactly the time of the past situation, as in the Spanish example, which I don't dare read, but it means I got up at 5 o'clock in reply to a question, why I am looking so tired. It's kind of present perfect continuous in English. Why are your eyes red? I haven't been sleeping well, right? Something like that. That's it. The Spanish speaker says when, and then uses present perfect. In English, it is simple past. And then other researchers closer to us after 2010, say, started talking about it in two ways. First, about typology, and this is where this heuristic drift was introduced by Bybee actually earlier in 1999. She introduced this term, but it was kind of infiltrated in the research a decade later or so. And then there was this notion of current relevance. In the next slide, I will give other terms for this current relevance. It's where it refers to those sentences where Spanish speakers use either perfect forms or aorist forms, meaning kind of the equivalent to English simple past, based on the concept of current relevance in practically the same context. But some of them will be considered by the speakers, by the Spanish speakers, as relevant to the moment of speech, to the present time, while others that look exactly the same to speakers of English and to us, while we don't have perfect as such in our native language, those contexts look exactly the same, but Spanish speakers would see something in them that shows lack of focus on current relevance. So it will be the same context, but this relationship towards with the present moment is not in focus. And then instead of saying, when did you arrive, literally with past tense, some Spanish speakers would say, when have you arrived? Even after this word when, which in English requires the use of past simple. And another term for current relevance is present relevance, which was discussed in detail by Vladimir Alexandrovich Plungyan in his famous work that includes part about Spanish perfect, but not only. It's a typology of uses of perfect tenses, and he says that it works in the direction of weakening the resultative, such resultative that describes not a specific state as the result of a certain action, but any, even indirect result relevant at the moment of speech. And interestingly, quite a few researchers into varieties of Spanish noticed this ability to occur with specific time adverbials, or as Koppel said, non-specific temporal relevance, which focus the hot news perfect. And the interesting direction of research for Spanish for those who research Spanish varieties was to look at the diaries, at the books written in the genre of a diary, or at real diaries like Ana Frank's diary in Spanish. And this is where they drew the distinction between hodiernal action, and hodiernal action means related to today, it's from today, and pre-hodiernal action, which is supposed to be expressed by aorist, and that accounts for the variation between present perfect and kind of simple past in Spanish context for present perfect. And Елена Горбова, whom Елизавета Alexandrovna mentioned, who is a very well-known aspectologist, she wrote these 5 conclusions about present perfect in Spanish. I don't seem to have enough time. I'll very quickly read it to you without any comments. If the opposition hodiernal, pre-hodiernal is adopted, and the question is whether it should be adopted, it says it has, whether or not it has been adopted, it's still an open question. But if it has been adopted, then the restriction on using present perfect for sequence of events that came one after another in the past in a narrative is lifted. The restriction is not there anymore. We don't need to impose this restriction in Spanish, although it does exist in English. Remember, in English, if we say first this, second that, meaning in the past, no matter which past, recent or whatever, we can't use present perfect at all. If we focus on first, second, and then, that's only past simple that we can use, or present simple, but not present perfect. And then the second conclusion, analysis of diary entries about the past and about the recent past in particular, gives this conclusion. Hodiernal context invite uses of present perfect, but do not ban uses of past simple, or its equivalent, for the same situations in case the speaker doesn't focus on their current relevance, just as we discussed when we looked at this term. The third conclusion, in stories about the day past, both oral stories and written in diaries, present perfect is used, but so are both imperfect and aorist, with the difference between the oppositions with present perfect, between present perfect and imperfect, having 2 features of difference, and in the opposition between present perfect and past, only 1 feature of difference. Other than that, both are applied in the same context. The fourth conclusion, present perfect in Spanish, and remember, it's all about Spanish, shares with past tense potential for culmination, while it also implies current relevance, understood more broadly than relevance at the moment of speech, as the focus is not unfinished day, week, month, or even century. So you may say something like, why are Russian people whatever, whatever? And then you will say, because they have done, meaning over the last century or so. Perfectly all right in Spanish. I mean, it's all right in uses of present perfect in general. Now, in narratives, present perfect is realized as experiential tense form, and then it combines with irrelevant and unspecific temporal references. So the moment you talk about experiential context, you expect, in Spanish, you expect the high percentage of those just, already, yet, and so on and so forth. And in this, Spanish is absolutely the same as English. In experiential use, that's what happens. Now, I'll try to complete it quickly. it's actually the last important slide, the discrepancies between the theory and the statistics in our research. And I'll present it in the way of answering our research questions. Russian learners use present perfect less frequently, yes, and by far less. Russian learners make more errors in present perfect use than Spanish students. No, the same percentage, just as we congratulated each other on that before. What semantic context with present perfect prevail in the two corpora? Evidently, and again by far, resultative present perfect. What are the differences in the use of present perfect in Russian and Spanish learner writing? Spanish learners use present perfect less than Russian learners in percentage, but the nature of erroneous uses with temporal adverbials is the same. So both Spanish and Russian learners say when the action happened and give the predicate in present perfect. I think the reason for doing it is because Spanish language uses it for Spanish perfect. That's why they kind of transfer it from L1 to the language they're studying. Russian learners use it for a different reason, which Елизавета Alexandrovna slightly skipped when she gave the presentation of present perfect in Russian. So I'll very quickly, in 1 minute, bring it in here. We talked about perfective aspect for Russian verbs, but we didn't mention the sentences like the Russian sentences in which Russian learners use past participle, сделано, without using the auxiliary in the past. For instance, you will hopefully agree with me that you can say, когда изобретено радио? Можно задать так вопрос по-русски? Кажется, вполне можно. А когда было изобретено радио, значит, совершенно то же самое. And if we translate it into English, this is where we don't need present perfect. We say when, so correspondingly, we have to use past simple. But because in Russian, we use this past participle, and past participle, Russian past participle, is kind of transferred into the English present perfect, because present perfect uses past participle as well. It does use a different auxiliary, I agree, but this is something, I mean, this is an interesting theoretical question. If the auxiliary is different, the form of the main verb is the same, and the auxiliary in Russian can be omitted, it's not there at all. Can it be considered a transfer from Russian language when Russian learners write, when has the radio been invented? In my view, it's possible. I have some theoretical proof that you may treat it this way, but I won't bother you with this now because we're running out of time. And the last thing, which errors can be described as independent of learners L1 and which can be explained by L1 transfer. This is kind of what I've been talking about. Errors in understanding extended now context as related or unrelated with the present moment come from L1 transfer in both languages, by the way, in English by Russian learners and English by Spanish learners. In the same context, Russian users also relate it to L1 interference, but the thing is they use present simple instead of present perfect rather than past simple as Spanish learners do. And in the recent past, Russian learners use past simple for reason related first to Russian verbal system. As I said, this past participle, one verb, one word predicate with past participle in Russian. And by the conventions of Russian academic discourse. And what I mean by that is that in Russian academic discourse you can say в 14 году происходит то-то и то-то, после чего было много того-то, того-то. And because in Russian academic discourse, you can combine the uses of present tenses with the uses of past tenses, this is transferred into the uses of present perfect in English. Okay, and these are our references. The one with the link in red is the link to the curriculum of a particular course in lexical semantics at Berkeley. And this gives a very nice presentation of telic and datelic verbs in all their subcategories that Elizaveta Alexandrovna mentioned, and that they may exhibit specific uses of present perfect. Thank you for bearing with us.
Thank you, Ольga Ильинична. Any questions?
Well, may I?
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you so much for your very informative and interesting presentation. You're really fantastic. I just wonder what is happening in modern English. What do you think of it? Is it becoming is it becoming syntactically simpler? What do you think?
Elizaveta Alexandrovna, I can start and you can add something. Thank you. Vlada, a brilliant question. Thank you so much. It's a dream question for me because I didn't say one thing which I will be able to say now. I cannot answer straight away about all the trends proved by statistics in the uses of native speakers present perfect, because this is not what we have been looking at for this report. But thanks to your question, I can say that Elena Viktorovna Gorbova, who discussed British uses of present perfect in comparison with Spanish uses of present perfect, says it's not Spanish perfect that has to be blamed for violating the limitation. It's English perfect that is so specific that typologically it's an odd one out of all other perfects in the world. So you are right that something has to happen to British present perfect, at least in some semantic contexts, because they are not compatible with kind of ideology of what a perfect tense is to be.
Thank you, Ольga Ильинична. I can just add that I have seen some examples of produced by native speakers of English when present perfect was used with definite time reference. And I even had to talk about this to a native speaker of English. And well, this is an educated person. She is actually a teacher of English for teachers of English all over the world. And she told me that, yes, it happens from time to time. Well, maybe it's not, we can't say that it's a trend now, but well, something is going on there. That's for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we should thank the audience for their attention, and Ольга Ильинична, thank you very much for your wonderful, detailed talk. And yeah, so yeah, we hope to finish this research sooner or later, and most importantly, get it published.
And if you come across any interesting example with present perfect, we're there for you at any time of day or night.
Yes, that's it. Okay.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Thank you.